Hi guys, welcome to episode 26. Today I'm going to talk about touring as a busker. Now in theory, this is an awesome thing. You get to travel the world while you pay your way from your performances. So in this episode, I'm going to talk about the expenses of touring, my experiences touring in Australia, and of course how much I earn from busking on each trip. So let's start with expenses. Obviously, if you tour, you're going to have to outlay some money to get to and from your destination, spending on things like flights, petrol, public transport, car hire, and parking. Then there's the accommodation. There are plenty of options when you travel as to where you want to stay, but if you're staying in a major city, your options are likely between a hostel, serviced apartments, or a hotel. While traveling on the road, you could also stay in caravan parks, motels, or camping grounds. Accommodation is generally the biggest expense of travelling. If you have your own van or caravan that you could travel in and sleep in, that might be a way to save money. You could see if you could stay with a friend or a friend of a friend for a reasonable rate. You could see if house sitting was an option, or even house swap where you stay at someone's house and they stay at yours. This wouldn't be an ideal thing if you want to travel to multiple places though. And lastly, there's this new thing called pod share, where you get your own single bed sized capsule room to sleep in and a storage locker. Similar to a hostel, but you have your own TV inside your capsule. After travel and accommodation, you then have permit costs. You have to research your proposed busking locations, what permits you'll need, and how you can get them in time to be able to busk on your trip. Traveling, you're also going to need to spend money on food. Once again, I'm sure there's ways you can reduce costs here. On my trips, I've spent an average of $20.99 a day. And then we get down to the smaller stuff, like upgrading your road assistance membership if you're driving across the country to make sure you're covered if you break down on the road. This, of course, is optional, but I did it for peace of mind. Then, if you're flying, you might have to spend more on baggage depending on the airline you're flying with. Also, if you're flying and you have a battery inverter set up like me, the batteries aren't allowed on the plane and you have to post them to yourself care of a post office located nearby where you're travelling to, and then pick them up when you get into town. To send them one way from Adelaide to any of Australia's major cities with Australia Post, the current cost would be $19.15 for my smaller battery and $20 for the larger one in a BX2 box, including the cost of the box. Make sure they're packaged really well, because the way mine have arrived each time has not been great. So next I want to share with you the baggage allowance of a few Australian airlines in regards to musicians. My favourite airline is Virgin Airways. They have a good baggage allowance for musicians and provide reasonably priced fares. Virgin allow musicians who are members of any one of the following Australian music industry bodies to fly with 64 kilograms of checked baggage over 4 pieces of luggage, with no one piece weighing more than 32 kilograms or being larger than these dimensions. Guests may take small musical instruments on board as carry-on baggage to be stored in the overhead lockers, provided that each instrument does not exceed dimensions of 85 by 34 by 23 centimetres. Any musical instrument over 32 kilograms must be sent as freight. Guests who wish to travel with a cello or guitar in the cabin must purchase an additional seat. So now on to Jetstar. Some flights come bundled with a baggage allowance, but their base flights have none and you have to pay extra. Here are the current costs of baggage allowance added to their base flights. Maximum baggage allowance per person is 40 kilograms, but you aren't limited on how many items or bags can make up this 40 kilograms. You can once again take small instruments on the plane as part of your carry-on. They need to weigh less than 7 kilograms, be 85 by 36 by 23 centimeters or smaller in size, and have to be stored in the overhead lockers. For larger instruments, you can purchase a seat for the instrument, but it must weigh less than 15 kilograms, and they have limits on how many can be taken per plane, so call them for more details. They also state they won't accept any liability for damage of instruments. If you want to bring your musical instrument as checked baggage and it is longer than 1 metre, including packaging, handles and wheels, an oversized item handling fee will apply. The weight of any oversized musical instruments will count towards your total checked baggage weight. No single bag or item can weigh more than 32 kilograms. And finally, Qantas. Qantas usually have the dearest flights that are generally way above Virgin and Jetstar in cost. Qantas allow musicians who are members of any one of the following Australian music industry bodies to fly with 69 kilograms of checked baggage over 3 pieces of luggage, with no one piece weighing more than 23 kilograms. I had a look around, but I couldn't find any dimension limitations. The current weight of my busking equipment on my trolley is 59.5 kilograms, with the trolley itself weighing 8.3 kilograms. I have a total of 13 items I take out busking. So I'm sure you can see I wouldn't be able to travel with my equipment as it is on any of these airlines. Given that I post my batteries, I still have to condense everything down to try and get anywhere near having 3 or 4 items. In the past, Virgin's baggage allowance for musicians was only 50 kilograms, but it didn't have a limit on the amount of items you could take. So when I have traveled, that's what I was working with. So instead of taking my hard keyboard case, for example, I took my soft keyboard case and massively wrapped my keyboard in bubble wrap. I tried to work with the weight limits and took lighter seats that were extremely uncomfortable, and a lot of the time I didn't take any CDs to sell. And you got to remember that after busking equipment, you still need to take like a suitcase of clothes and toiletries like you would on a regular trip. So that's going to cut down on some of your allowance as well, and one of your items. So I don't actually know whether I could get on a plane now and travel. I would have to do a lot of thinking and see if there's any way I could condense all of my equipment down to just 3 items plus a suitcase for my personal stuff. Here's an example of how I've traveled in the past with my busking equipment. As you can see, there are 7 items there, so that wouldn't work nowadays. So yeah, not sure what I'll do if I want to fly somewhere to busk again. Hopefully you guys have a lot less equipment than me though and can manage it. I'm now going to show you some figures for my touring experiences, breaking down the expenses into travel, accommodation, permits, food, and other related expenses. I will also show you how much I earned from busking and whether each trip was a profit or a loss. Now I'm only going to show these spreadsheets briefly so we can move things along, but feel free to pause the video if you wish to study these for longer. So here they are. I've been on 6 busking trips since 2011. Each one had expenses between $437.30 and a massive $3,348.61. The amounts I brought in from each busking trip were between $126.85 and $567.95. As you can see, I unfortunately have never made a profit when I've toured, and I made a loss each trip of between $83.25 and $2,830.36. One thing to mention is that when you take a busking trip, you might not work every single day. You might need a rest, or the weather might be against you, and even in some cases, the places you plan to busk may be basically deserted and just not worth stopping at. So this is why I've included the number of days I actually spent busking for reference. The next spreadsheet I have shows a daily comparison to bring each trip down to an even playing field. I decided to show my busking earnings daily rate 2 ways, the first being divided by the number of days of the trip, and the second divided by the number of days actually worked. You can see at the end of the day I made a loss of between $50.92 and $146.44 each day. Lastly, I decided to lump the daily figures from all the trips together and divide it down to get the overall average expenses, earnings, and loss figures per day. So here that is. So I have a few things that hold me back from the cheapest options of accommodation. Firstly is safety. I'm a female traveling alone, and I'm honestly not brave enough to just set up a tent and camp for the night. I also don't stay in mixed gender hostel rooms. I have stayed in plenty of female only hostel rooms, but I'm just not interested in sleeping next to a bunch of strangers who are men. My equipment is another big factor. Having somewhere to store it when I'm not using it means if I'm staying in a shared hostel room, that hostel needs to have a storage room of some sort. Now, putting it in a storage room is still risky because a lot of people have access to that storage room, and sometimes the procedures of getting your luggage from the storage room leaves a little to be desired. Like you could just go in and pick up someone else's bag. So, you are at risk of having your stuff stolen, but so far in my experience that hasn't happened, but it's the world we live in, so it is a little bit risky. Having all my equipment, I am also limited to places that are within a close proximity to where I intend to busk, so that I can manage pushing my 60-kilogram trolley the distance. And lastly, like anyone travelling, if you've driven there, you need somewhere to park your car that's close by. Now, I know a few buskers who tour and do it successfully. Unfortunately for me, I haven't been that lucky. Now, while I didn't profit on a lot of these trips, they were honestly great experiences. And even though I still wish I could crack making it worthwhile to tour, I have a lot of wonderful memories. So that's all from me. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you're a busker and you have successfully toured, can you let me know in the comment section down below how you did it? Because I would really like to know. Anyway, I will be back with another video shortly, so if you haven't already, subscribe and click the little bell icon to make sure you're notified when I upload again. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.